Hello children, let's read the text, the priceless gift. In the last class, I had a discussion with you, the first sense group. We have covered first part. Let's see how far you have remembered the first part. So I am asking you something about first part. So let us see how far you have remembered the things, so that it will be easier you to link the part 2. Then why did Mr. Gupta tell lies? You know, was Mr. Gupta a liar? No, Mr. Gupta was not a liar. How do you know? Maggie told that. Maggie told Mr. Gupta that Indians are truthful person. As Mr. Gupta was an Indian, he was truthful. But telling lies does not mean that telling lies would not make Mr. Gupta a liar. Why? Because if Mr. Gupta has decided to tell lies, he has decided to tell lies to save the life of Mrs. Frankie on the request of Maggie. Maggie requested him to save the life of her mother by telling lies. And Mr. Gupta thought a while and he decided to tell lies for the sake of the mother. So it is not a sin to save the life of other. So at the very moment, Mr. Gupta acted as if he could know about Frankie by gazing at the ring. He gazed at the ring and told Mrs. Bethy that Frankie was all right. So that helped Mrs. Bethy to be recovered very soon. So that was a very pleasurable event for Mr. Gupta. And today, let us see what happened. Now, before going to the topic, part 2, before going to text part 2, let's see the summary of the story. Maggie as well as Mrs. Bethy were very worried about Frankie, as they had not received any news from him since a long. She showed a ring to Mr. Gupta sent by Frankie from India and told him to say about Frankie by gazing at the ring. Mr. Gupta saw that it was a common ring, ordinary ring, but he did not disclose the truth. The thought of Frankie made Mrs. Bethy seriously. Maggie requested Mr. Gupta to look at the ring and tell Mrs. Bethy a lie that Frankie was alive and well. Now, hearing the good news from Mr. Gupta, Mrs. Bethy was completely recovered. After a few days, the family received the death news of Frankie. Now the writer had to return India. He had no face to say goodbye to Maggie and Mrs. Bethy, as he felt himself guilty for telling lies to Bethy. In the morning of his departure, Maggie met Mr. Gupta, gave him a shilling to buy flowers for her brothers and laid them on his grave. The shilling was a priceless gift which carried a lot of love, affection and sacrifice of a girl for her brother. So this is all about the second part of the test. Now, children, Mr. Gupta looked at the ring, told lies to mother that Frankie was all right, and that made Mrs. Bethy to be recovered very soon. And at the meantime, after a few days, the time of coming back to India came for Mr. Gupta. That means Mr. Gupta had to come back India. And Mr. Gupta was very much interested to meet the family and say them goodbye. But he was undone. He had no face to meet them. Why? Mr. Gupta calculated that when he told lies to Mrs. Bethy, at that time, after few days, just after few days, Frankie had already died there. And the family had already received the death news of Frankie. So Mr. Gupta felt himself guilty as he had already told lies to Mrs. Bethy. A lady of that moment should have believed him that Mr. Gupta was a truthful person, but his truthfulness remained as wrong. His forecast justified as wrong, and he may be treated as a liar for Mrs. Bethy. That's why he had no face to meet the family again and say them goodbye. So Mr. Gupta felt guilty. So what happened then? So instead of going there, Mr. Gupta dropped a letter to them announcing his departure. He wrote that he had to leave for India, so he just message for them. So on the very day of his departure, what happened? So when he was having breakfast, he heard the knock at the door. So Mr. Gupta opened the door. He saw Maggie there. Maggie came to Mr. Gupta to bid him goodbye. And at the very moment what happened? Mr. Gupta and Maggie both became emotional. Maggie knew that Mr. Gupta was a truthful person, but for the sake of mother, for the life of mother, for the recovery of her mother, Mr. Gupta carried an image of liar for Maggie. But Mr. Gupta was not a liar. He was an honest and truthful person. So that thing was well known, well realized by Maggie. So Maggie became very emotional because she had to say goodbye to Gupta, and she had also lost her brother who was a soldier and posted in India. So now she offered Gupta a shilling and requested him to buy flowers with that shilling and lay on the grave of her brother. And you see, children, how emotional thing it was. The girl had already lost her brother. Now Mr. Gupta was just going to leave in London for India, and he knew about the pathetic condition of the family and how both became very emotional. Now Mr. Gupta thought not to receive the money from the girl because the girl was earning the shilling with much toil, with much hard labor, but she did not like to shake her love and affection sacrifice. He did not like to shatter the love and affection of the girl towards her brother. Because, a man may be poor in profession, but he may be rich in love and affection. And that was the fact what Mr. Gupta observed with the girl. Though she was very poor young girl, she was earning money with much difficulty, her love, affection towards her brother was so rich that Mr. Gupta was unable to deny her that he would not receive the money and he would give flower to the grave of brother, because in India flowers are plentifully available. But he did not do that. He did not like to break the heart of the girl. He received the shilling and assured the girl, the moment he will reach there, he will go to the frontier border, because the girl informed Mr. Gupta that her brother was buried at the border, the frontier. So Mr. Gupta assured her, as soon as he would join his service in India, he would definitely visit the grave and offer flower to Frankie and write to her. Now both became emotional, because the gift carried the token of love, affection and sacrifice of the girl for brother. Now that was priceless gift, and Mr. Gupta became very emotional. Tear came to his eyes. Tear also came to the eyes of Maggie. Now Mr. Gupta bid goodbye to Maggie and went to upstairs to prepare himself for the journey. So this is all about the story of the second part. Now children, now we will discuss what you understood. And before that, we must know the meaning of some new words and who are the characters and what event took there. Now I told you the story. Then we will have a detailed discussion so that you will be able to answer the questions at the stage of comprehension. Now you have to find out where the scene took place. So now in the second part of discussion, our discussion, first Mr. Gupta came to Maggie's house. That means the first stage, the story started, the plot was like that: Maggie's house, where Bethy's house, Mrs. Bethy's house, where Maggie requested Mr. Gupta. That means Mr. Gupta, Maggie and mother are the three characters there. So the area, the plot, the setting was Maggie's house. So what happened? What event took place there? What work done there? That means Maggie requested Mr. Gupta to look at the ring and tell Mrs. Bethy that Frankie was all right. This was the done work. So what was the consequence? This was the problem. What was the problem? Problem was Mrs. Bethy was very serious. Mrs. Bethy was very serious, and the showing of ring and telling of the truth for Bethy lies for Gupta, and telling of Gupta that declaration of Gupta that Frankie was all right was the thing done there, and the consequence, as a consequence of that, Mrs. Bethy was recovered. So this is the thing, and there are three characters. So in the second plot, what happened? It was the place of Mr. Gupta's house, where Mr. Gupta was staying. That is the place, and Maggie came to that place in the morning to say goodbye to Mr. Gupta. So here we will get two areas. One is Maggie's house, second one is Mr. Gupta's residence, where he was staying for short time. So these are the two plots. In the first plot we discussed, what happened? Let's see the second plot. Now second plot, there are two characters, only Maggie and Mr. Gupta. Then both looked at each other, exchanged their feeling. Maggie could not say that she was so emotional, that she was with heavy heart, that she could not express that her brother had already been dead when Mr. Gupta declared that Maggie was already. Because Maggie knew the thing that Mr. Gupta had already told lies for the sake of Maggie. And why Mr. Gupta was unable to meet Betty? Because Maggie was responsible. Mr. Gupta was not responsible. Mr. Gupta told lies for the sake of the mother, for her recovery. But Mr. Gupta felt guilty. Both Maggie as well as Mr. Gupta could realize, and the exchange they are feeling, their heart was exchanged. Both exchanged the heart each other. They understood each other. They understood, they shared their emotion with each other. Now, this is the plot, and Mr. Gupta received a shilling from Maggie, and Maggie requested Gupta buy flower, offer the flower to the grave. Also Mr. Gupta assured. Now this is all about the gist of the story, the characters, and the area or the plot where the story took place, and what is the problem, what is the consequence. Now, children, after that, let's see the meaning of some new words. Welled off, appeared, or flushed, that means tear appeared in the eyes. Frontier, you know, border. Felt ashamed, was ashamed of. Then departure, act of leaving or returning to one's place or exist. Announce means declare, tell, say like this. Exactly means perfectly, precisely, minutely. Until means not till, at the present moment. Grave, you know, site of burial. Then part means region. Gratitude, obligation, acknowledgement, that means we should show obligation to other when we feel that they have done a lot of things for us, that is obligation. Shilling, you know, 20 shillings make an English pound, the money of England. Profusion, that is plenty, abundance, enough. Foregoing means sacrificing. Mourning means lamenting, grieving for something. Now this is all about the question, the meaning of the words. Now come to the comprehension, question answers. Now see how far you have understood the text. First of all, I told you, I have discussed with you that why the writer was bound or forced to tell a lie. So our question is like, what made the writer tell a lie about the ring? Maggie's request for the recovery of her mother from illness made the writer tell a lie. Now, see the second question. How did Mr. Gupta's lie help Mrs. Betty? That means, when Mr. Gupta told lies, what happened to Mrs. Betty? Hearing from Mr. Gupta that Frankie was alive and well, she was completely recovered. Why did the writer feel guilty about himself? When he felt guilty at the time of departure, when the writer wanted to go back India, then at that very moment he did not have the face to meet the family because he felt guilty. So this is the question. Why did the writer feel guilty about himself? The writer realized that when he told Mrs. Betty that Frankie was alive, he had already died then. So he felt guilty by himself and did not go to say goodbye to Maggie and Mrs. Betty. Now, how did Maggie come to know that Mr. Gupta was leaving for India? Now Mr. Gupta did not visit them. He dropped a letter for them announcing his departure. We have already discussed at the time of explanation. Now this is the question you can answer. How did Maggie came to know that Mr. Gupta was leaving for India? She received a letter from Mr. Gupta regarding his departure. Okay. Now come to number 5. What did Maggie give the writer and what did she request? Maggie gave a shilling to him and requested him to buy flowers for her brother's grave. What did the writer feel when Maggie gave him the shilling? I told you how the writer became very emotional as he knew the poor condition of the girl. At first he did not like to receive money, but what he did, you see, he became emotional. He did not find any word to deprive the girl of her gift. He assured her to buy flowers with the shilling and offer flowers to Frankie's grave. Number 7. Was the gift of Maggie a priceless gift? Yes, definitely this is priceless because the gift carries the love, affection and sacrifice of the girl. The gift is a priceless gift as it carried love, affection and sacrifice of a girl towards her deceased brother, dead brother. Okay, children. Now we discussed the summary first. Then we came to the text. Then we discussed the new or strange words. Then we did the comprehension question answer. So there are also other things, other questions that you have to answer from the text. And this is all about the part 2. It does not mean that this is all these questions are covering the teat and beat of the topic. Then you just come to the topic, come back to the sense group first or part 1, and you can also get number of questions out of the paragraph. If you come to the paragraph and ask yourself any WH questions line by line, then you will be able to understand the text in a very nice way. Then just I am showing you the technique, the method, how you can revise the lesson and how you will be able to answer the teat and beat of the topic, and you will be also very confident about it. Let's see. I went to vegetarian restaurant. If this is the question, who is I here? The word I refers to whom? So like this, the questions will carry 1 mark only. You can answer the question in a word or a sentence or 2 sentences. So here I stand for the writer. So who is the writer? Mr. Gupta. So in the like manner, you can also put yourself some questions and find the answer at the time of revision. So this is a very easy method. You should not be confused when you are reading the topic, and if you are unable to understand anything, any point, you just put questions to yourself so that you can find the answer in the text, because some answers are readily available. We call it factual questions. In the most of the cases, you can find the factual answers because answers are readily available with the question and with the test. Thank you all.